Me now is former acting U.S. Attorney General Matt Whitaker. And Matt, good morning to you. Your thoughts?
Good morning.
As we're going to hear from John Durham himself.
Yeah, so the John Durham testimony is going to be fascinating. Obviously, the stuff behind closed doors is going to be even more interesting. But as we hear from John Durham, I think we should listen very carefully as to whether he puts any color on his decision not to prosecute any further individuals. There's several individuals that I think, were mentioned in his report that I'm sure he considered prosecuting, and it'd be interesting to know, why he didn't think he hit the threshold on those in order to bring charges.
I've listened to your commentary already when it comes to the classified documents case, but there's obviously the, I'm going to say, misguided situation here with Alvin Bragg and the former president. And then you've got this case now in Florida, but then you've also got Georgia and possibly January 6th when it comes to things that the former president either is or could be facing. From a political standpoint, if you look at the polls, he's above 50% in the race to be the next president.
Yeah, and I think the polls are probably going to stay there no matter whether these additional charges are brought in Georgia or if Jack Smith decides to bring January 6th. Because, what happened in this case is they targeted President Trump. They have been looking to get President Trump since really 2015. They tried to get him with the Russian collusion case. It was unsuccessful. And I think, each one of these cases, if it wasn't Donald Trump, these cases wouldn't be around. They're not, they're not looking to get any other individuals except target Donald Trump. And, each case has its own unique twists and turns, and it's going to have its own unique timeline. But, we should expect that none of this will resolve until after the presidential election in 2024.
Well, Amera's poll finding that 56% of Americans, the majority being Democrats and independents, think that he should drop out of the 2024 race. GOP voters, though, that's what I was referencing, they disagree. The same poll, 83% of Republicans support Trump's run for president following his indictment. Matt, these are very serious charges, in particular the federal charges he's facing over the documents. From your legal mind, where do you think that case goes?
Well, first of all, they're also unprecedented, and we haven't ever seen the Presidential Records Act interplay with the Espionage Act. It's very interesting how Jack Smith has pled this case to try to avoid some of the other statutes that may come into play on the classifications of these documents. He seems to have kept it fairly simple. He didn't bring in too many, any other classification statutes that would complicate his case. But at the same time, I just think this whole idea of him going to get a protective order that you mentioned earlier is a little, I think it tries to dirty up President Trump a little more, suggests that he can't be trusted with these documents. He's trusted for 4 years with these documents. There's no indications that serious harm was ever done to our country. And in fact, he needed those documents, to be president of the United States. And now that the federal government has them back, any risk that they believed is gone completely. Yeah,
well, and now they're asking that if he views any documents, he has to have a lawyer present. Maria was asking Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs about impeaching President Biden yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures. I want you to listen to this.
Joe Biden should be impeached. First thing we would do is we should take a preferred motion to the floor so it'd get priority, and then it goes to the House Judiciary Committee. We do our inquiry, and then we make a recommendation to the entire body. That should be going on forthwith. There's a significant number in our conference that aren't there yet. I'm not sure what's going to take to get them there.
Matt, James Comer says that he's got more witnesses to come and that we're going to have more revelations out of his committee investigation. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, an impeachment obviously is a political proceeding. They're going to need only a majority in the House. They had a hard, they couldn't get, they were 20 votes short of trying to censure, Adam Schiff. And so I don't see where an impeachment at this point in time, without more information and without more evidence, can meet the bar of high crimes and misdemeanors against Joe Biden. If it does, then they certainly should do that. It's going to die in the Senate for lack of, 3/4 vote. But at the same time, Andy Biggs and the House Republicans, if that's what they want to pour their priorities and their effort on, I mean, certainly they have the prerogative to do that. I mean, there's a lot of other things in addition to that they should be focused on and trying to help the American people, too.
Yeah, Matt Cristolenzo is with me here on set. Just got a question for you.
So in terms of what we've been seeing with former President Trump, I mean, Joe Biden was literally in the exact same situation, I mean, very similar scenario with classified documents. Do you think there will be any proceedings going forward against him, given the fact that he was a senator at the time that he had these classified documents?
Yeah, and I hear that a lot. Former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Rob Hur has been appointed, and he was a U.S. Attorney, too, in the Trump administration to investigate that situation, because you're right, Joe Biden had a tremendous number of documents strewn kind of all over every location he had occupied at any time. And that is a serious question. They're going to run into a problem, though, if they decide to prosecute Joe Biden. That is that a sitting president under DOJ standards can't be prosecuted. But that being said, Rob Hur has been missing in action. We haven't heard a single thing from the special counsel. We don't know, where that is come. But if you're going to say that the charges against Donald Trump are serious, you have to say then the behavior of Joe Biden was equally as serious, because and at the same time, Joe Biden didn't have the same ability to possess those documents that Donald Trump did.
Well, and as far as the relationship with the Ukrainians and Hunter Biden and his influence peddling years ago, using his then vice president father, to drop names and collect millions in paychecks, not just from the Ukrainians but also from the Chinese. Let's be clear here, for whatever he was supposedly doing for Burisma and these Chinese companies, whatever expertise the man has. But James Comer's not done. I want to reiterate that he was on with Mark Levin last night on the news channel, and he said, there is more to come. He's got the bank records. From what we understand, he's still going through bank records, and he might be getting more bank records. So at what point does this put President Biden in legal jeopardy? And I understand that he's the sitting president, but or put Hunter Biden in legal jeopardy.
Yeah, Hunter Biden's been in legal jeopardy for several years now, really ever since the laptop surfaced and had direct evidence of crimes. And so I'm just, that's another case that it seems like anything against the Biden family is really slow-rolled. You have the U.S. attorney up in Delaware, who's, kind of we haven't heard from either, and there should be charges forthcoming in that, I would imagine. But, the Joe Biden investigation is going to be very interesting, because Congress does have tremendous powers to dig and to get in the information they need, and they're going to keep turning over these rocks and try to prove that Joe Biden was influence peddling with his job as vice president, and that's very concerning. And Hunter Biden appears to be his wingman. So, hopefully, if there is something there, that it'll turn up in Comer's investigation, they'll act appropriately and maybe get to that majority standard.
Absolutely. Matt Whitaker, it's always great to have you on the show. Come back soon.
All right. Always enjoy it. Thank you.